Okay, so far, no. I haven't finished my text yet, Chewy. Can you do something while I finish my text?
You're sending a text. Is it to me?
No, it's to Lloyd. No worries,
Oh,
either
that's
way.
hurtful. Very hurtful.
Can't soon. Or not.
We'll start with the show with some apologies from the chat. Ben says he might be a bit late today. He needs to go forth and fulfill Luxon's commands.
Do you know, I saw that in the
ominous.
Chat. Do you know what I thought that said? I don't mean to gross you out, but I thought it said fulfill Luxon's condoms. And I'm like, yeah, that's quite topical at the moment.
This is pretty close.
I'm not entirely sure we're having.
Luxon, why aren't we all busy having sex instead of being on this stupid podcast?
Well, you might want to know this, but right before we start, Chewy and I actually... Oh, no, we won't get there. We won't get there. Not at all. Docking. No, we won't get there at all. We're not going to get there at all. Hey, team. Lloyd Bursity was going to join us tonight for a bit of a chat about Michael Wood. I always want to say Michael Woodhouse.
Michael Woodhouse.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And so we'll see if he jumps in. You know what we're like, team. If Lloyd jumps in, we'll say, good day, mate. And if he doesn't, we'll keep on trucking on. I mean, it's always a bit concerning when we have guests, Chewy, because that turns our 90-minute, 60-minute show into a 120-minute, 60-minute show. Especially when it's the last one of the week and we kind of go, oh, we've got to cram everything in. So we've got more and more and more and more and more to talk about. Anywho. So kia ora whanau. Welcome. Hope you're all doing well today. Did you have a good day today, Chewy?
Not bad. Not a bad day. It is very cold down here. Which is great.
Do you know how I tell the temperature, other than looking at the frickin' thermometer? I mean, what I mean is, I can tell. You can tell it's cold when you measure the temperature later in the day. So my kids are at their mums at the moment, but my 16-year-old wanted to sleep in because she had a study period to start off with. So she was like, "Can you take me to school at 9:30?" I was like, "Yeah, that's fine." So she came over to my place. And at 9:30, we drove out the door in 1 degrees. So at 9:30 in the morning, it was still 1 degrees. So yeah, she was a chilly one. However, my favourite day. I'll show you why. Okay, you ready for this? What am I trying to do? I'm doing that. There you go. It's a picture I took today.
It's a beautiful building. The Presbyterian space rocket.
Yeah, I went and met up with a mate. We had sushi in town. We went and sat on the grounds of First Church. And this is my favourite weather in Dunedin, right? It's, for me, summertime can be a bit grey in Dunedin, but this is a classic winter day in Dunedin. Cloudless skies, a real crisp chill in the air, and just stunning. It was a stunning day, and it's going to be stunning until probably next Tuesday. It's going to be like this every day. So this is a church in our outer Auckland called First Church. It's the people, when people talk about the cathedral, they talk about the Anglican one in the Octagon. This is the most spectacular church in Dunedin, without question, potentially in New Zealand. It's been said it's the most impressive 19th century building in New Zealand, which means some people say it's more impressive than the original cathedral in Christchurch, which were both built around the same sort of time. So it's a pretty spectacular building on the outside. Inside, she's a bit dated, obviously, but on the outside, it's a gorgeous piece of architecture. So yeah, that was mine. That was my lunch today.
Did you just say a church was a bit dated?
What I mean is, probably in the 1960s they revamped it, so it kind of feels like if it was original, it would be even better. But it feels a bit 1960s on the inside and a bit sort of.
I'm just imagining you walking in, going, bit old, yuck.
Yeah. Yeah, where do I park my iPad or something like that?
You got any Wi-Fi in this joint?
Yeah, yo brothers. So anyway, yeah, it's a cracker of a day, and I thought tonight we've got a bunch of stuff to talk about as is always. I did want to address something today, though, mostly to people who kind of often say, well, why don't you talk about this? And why don't you talk about this? And the answer is, basically, other than you lovely patrons who we'll get onto shortly, we do this sort of as a hobby. Like, we'd love it to be more than that. And we are talking to people about making it more than that. But actually, at the moment, it's a hobby. Yesterday, I spent 6 hours in the studio preparing for last night's show and covering off the show from the night before, making clips and stuff. 6 hours, right? Today, I was out meeting some people for lunch stuff. They haven't been as long. But still, I probably put 30 hours a week. This is not including the broadcast, but I probably put between 20 and 30 hours a week work into the show, preparing and editing. And there's just not enough time of the day to cover off everything. So we don't get to everything. If we had, business mummy and daddy giving us $2 million for 2 years, we might do a 2-hour show. We might cover off more things, but we don't. So we don't. So we get what we get. And to be honest, we really get the things that, if we're fair, Chewy, not to take away from your input, but because I kind of do the prep, that kind of intrigue me. And I think, that'll be interesting to talk about. And also things that I think will interest you as in the audience. I don't care about Chewy because he will talk about anything because he's a comedian. And that's sort of how we roll. But I just noticed a few comments this week about people saying, why haven't you talked about this? And why? It's just resource and time. That's literally all it is. Yeah. So just thought I'd throw it out there and let you all know. And we'll truck on. What else, Chewy? Should we look at some of the clips first of all, or should we go into a story first of all, or what would you like to do, sir?
Oh, let's do some of these clips that you've been talking about.
This, look, I'm sure lots of people have seen this clip, but because it's going around the internet. Actually, I might have to use the old framing, because if I use this framing, will I block off some of the words? Or maybe it won't. Maybe it'll be perfect.
Use the old frame.
Use the old framing. Okay, I'll use the old framing.
There we go.
Or I could use this one, or I could use this one. Or I could use this one, or I could use this one, or should we just use this one? I'm pretty sure this is in Auckland. I thought it might be the Avondale Racecourse. I don't think it is. So in Auckland, like lots of the country, there's some fantastic weekend markets. In Otara, there's a fantastic weekend market. There used to be one at the Avondale Racecourse, which I think might have stopped now, but this might be there as well.
I think this is the Avondale market.
Avondale Racecourse. Yeah, that was just down the road from where I used to live. It's fantastic. And this has just been flying around the internet recently because it's sort of what biculturalism, multiculturalism can look like, and sort of people going, so you don't need to be afraid of it. I'm pretty sure the gentleman that we're seeing on the screen right now says he's from Hong Kong, and he's speaking to a Māori, a New Zealand Māori, and they switched languages, I think, 3 or 4 times and talk to each other in native tongues. And it's just beautiful. It's a lovely little clip, and I wanted to play it. So this is really for your enjoyment.
Where are you from?
I'm from New Zealand.
You're from New Zealand?
Yeah. Are you from New Zealand?
I'm in New Zealand. Are you Maori?
Yeah.
You are. Ko wai to ingoa.
Ko Jama toku ingoa.
Joma. Ko tisiang taku ingoa. No hiakui.
No Rotorua.
No Rotorua. Ai. Oh, hare mai, tamaki
makai. Nakue. So do you speak Malay?
Yes, I speak. Oh.
你会说华语吗？
哎，
你会说华语吗？
可以。
哦，你好厉害！
你在哪里学华语呢？
在北京。
在北京。
对，我在北京上大学。
不是在 Auckland 上大学。
不是，在北京大学上。
为什么在北京大学？
因为我有奖学金。
Tenera makariri？
哎，Hetino makariri。
Back into Māori.
Go.
So
that's awesome.
I think that's the correct technical word for that is fucking dope. That is a completely, I came across that a couple of days ago. I meant to share it last night, but I didn't. And I just think it's cool. It's just, I don't know. I mean, I know I'm being a little bit Pollyanna and rose tinted glasses, but that's everything that is amazing about people within different cultures and different religions reaching across and speaking to one another in their native tongue. It's wicked. I loved it. Anyway, I wanted to share that tonight, Chewy.
From the comments I saw on Reddit, that the Chinese fella's actually quite well known and is quite capable of holding conversations in a bunch of languages, including Samoan and Tongan as well. So, wow, that's impressive.
Yeah,
I'm always impressed with people that can switch languages just like that. Like it's so far beyond me.
Yeah, I barely speak English, bro. I resonate with Ralph Wiggum. That line he says, "Me fail English, that's impossible." That's what I resonate with.
I mean, when I did a bunch of traveling, like I thought, oh yeah, everyone speaks English, I'll be good as gold. But man, when you get into countries that the English is the second language, you feel very vulnerable.
Yeah.
You know, like big swathes of France will speak English begrudgingly.
Yeah.
You know, Germany. I've traveled up into Finland and stuff like that. The Netherlands, Italy, Greece. Yeah, all the way through. English, yeah, most people are okay at it, but it's definitely not the first choice.
Very good. Something else I saw on the news tonight, which we're not going to talk about, but it just really kind of shocked me, was what's happening in the US in the moment. I was watching One News as I was eating dinner tonight, and both myself and the person watching it was like, holy crap. So I'm sure people know about this, but there's wildfires, like 300 of them in Canada at the moment. And for a change, it's the US that's currently getting invaded rather than doing the invading by the smoke coming down from Canada from all their wildfires. And this is, now I wouldn't be surprised if this is someone's Insta whatever, whether there's a little bit of a filter there as well. But, you know, we experienced this with the Australian fires, how orange the world sort of looked. But this is New York, Manhattan at the moment, and those areas. This is because of the wildfire. I saw, I think on One News, I think I was watching, there's an air pollution meter, and above 100 is said to be significant. And I think they might have mentioned Beijing was like 125, and like, sorry, the name jumped out of my head, but the capital of India was like 116. New York is over 400 at the moment with their air quality because of these things going on. You know, they've cancelled flights, they've closed down schools. I'm sure the anti-vaxxers will be annoyed about that, because why would you ever have to shut down a school? I mean, it's just air. But this, you can see what's going on. I mean, the haze and the orange, it's amazing and slightly terrifying at the same time. It reminds me of Delhi. Thanks, Emma. Reminds me of, have you seen, my brain's not working properly tonight, people, as opposed to normally. It's a Seth Rogen movie where him and all his friends are in a house, and it's the end of the world.
Oh,
and
yes.
That one. This scene here makes me feel like that Los Angeles scene, CG scene at the end of the world. It's like there's volcanoes coming up from the underside of the world. But yeah, I was shocked by it.
It reminds me of the latest Blade Runner, actually.
Right, 2049, that one.
Yeah. They had an orange filter over everything for that. The video that I've seen, because with all of these pictures, and it was the same here when we had the Aussie bushfires and the sky went orange and that sort of thing. If everything's orange, it's really hard to get a gauge. So I saw this on Twitter, just saying, well, you need the contrast to really see it.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So that's because otherwise it just looks like a filter, right?
Yeah.
But that's what the light is like when you got a proper color grade up.
And of course, then they get home and their laptop goes because it's now full of smoke and ash. So thank you for giving the life of your MacBook there, so we could see that. But that's really.
I mean, I remember here from the Aussie bushfires how just unsettling that, you know, days and days of an orange sky, just because it's not normal. It doesn't feel right. Everything feels spooky, and the fact that you could smell a bushfire in Australia here in New Zealand is just crazy.
Them smelly bushes, bro. You know about that.
These big bushfires, you know, they used to be reasonably unusual. Doesn't seem to be that way anymore.
I guess that's what a lot of people
we should be concerned about.
I have to tell you though, I mean, much like those of us who are accepting the climate science and are on board with that conversation, and then someone comes out and goes, "Oh, it's been such a cold winter and an average. Obviously, global warming is not a real thing." And we say to them, "Well, you can't look at the isolated incident of this 1 year. You look at the graph for the last 40." I think the problem with us pointing to things like these wildfires and going climate change, I'm not saying that it's not, but the problem is we need to do the same back again. So the only way we'll be able to find out is like evidence over a span of 30, 40, 50 years to show the trend, but it certainly feels that way. But if we're going to say to the deniers, just because you have a warm day a cool day doesn't mean that it's not there. We have to go because of this one series of fights. And I know there's not just one, don't jump down my throat, there's lots of them, but we always point to data being long term, not 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. So I agree that that's what it's looking like to me and feeling like, but to be able to make that unequivocal statement, we do need to wait for time and just sit back and let all the other fires happen first, and then we'll be able to be smug about it, Dewey.
Yeah,
hey.
Absolutely. Emma's got a great comment here. Looks like when the TV shows try to distinguish the US from Mexico, so they pop on the yellow filter.
Like it makes me think about some scenes from Breaking Bad when they're out in the desert, that sort of thing. Yeah. Hey, let's have a look. We're showing some clips and stuff. Let's have a look at one more thing, because friend of the show, Tucker Carlson, started up his new show today on Twitter. It's called, you ready for this? Tucker on Twitter. Hey, we can't see it. I wonder if they've done something with their filter to stop it being shown on shared. That's really interesting.
Could be a blessing.
Could be. Let me go back again. That's really interesting. What if I do it again? Ooh, what's happening?
Oh, okay. You have to go out of your way.
I know it's my fault. It's because you took the screen off me. And I was going, hang on, where's it gone?
Get it.
You took the screen off me. So this is Tucker Carlson's new show, and I have to say a couple of things here, right? The first
he's orange as well.
Yeah, that's because he's married to Donald Trump. The first is he is terrible without a series of producers and graphics behind him. Like, actually, for being a fairly astute broadcaster, I'm not talking about his politics or his messaging, but actually a pretty well-skilled broadcaster, doing it by himself looks terrible, sounds terrible, and really, it just doesn't come across all that polished. Have a listen just to 30 seconds or so of it. See if you can guess after 30 seconds what you think the full 10 minutes is going to be about, Chewy.
It was not a military tactic. It was Hey, it's Tucker Carlson. This morning it looks like somebody blew up the Kakhovka Dam in southern Ukraine. The rushing wall of water wiped out entire villages, destroyed a critical hydropower plant, and as of tonight puts the largest nuclear reactor in Europe in danger of melting down. So if this was intentional, it was not a military tactic. It was an act of terrorism.
Yeah. So there's a starting point. What do you think the next? I didn't watch the whole thing, to be honest, but what do you think the next 9 minutes goes on about?
Oh, is it still about the dam?
Yeah, it's about
so it's
pushes back on
for some reason.
the poor Russians being attacked by it, and again to talk to him script writing himself and not having producers. Listen to how he his allegory around what's going on with this dam and the poor Russians.
Thank you so much. No,
the Russians are dying. It's the best money we've ever spent, Graham says. A smile spreads across his thin, quivering lips as he forms the words. He looks like a starving man contemplating a breakfast buffet. The aroma of death has aroused Lindsey Graham. Thanks so much, replies Zelensky. He feels the same way. See, there's nothing dark here. Just two middle-aged guys celebrating the killing of a population. They don't seem like the kind of people who'd enjoy flooding villages or starting a famine. And in any case, who cares if they are? It's really not your business.
Yeah. So terrible, just not good, not good commentary.
Tucker Carlson.
However, and I'm sure many of you have seen this by now, the actual dam that's been happening, satellite imagery is talking about road damage and talking about it eroding over quite a few times. There was damage on the 1st of June, the 2nd of June, and then the 6th of June. So probably not an attack. Could be just an accident, wear and tear, a shoddily built Russian dam. But the biggest thing to remember is at no point did Tucker Carlson mention there the flooded villages. The flooded villages are Ukrainian villages.
Yeah.
So the idea that Ukraine attacked a Russian dam to then flood their own, well, it used to be in Russian territory. I think Russian built it. But to attack and flood their own people, causing death and destruction. Occam's razor would say if it was an attack, wouldn't it make more sense for the Russians to have done it to flood Ukrainian citizens than the Ukraine? He's basically saying the only logic here would be if he's calling it a false flag. That would be the only logic. But anyway,
I think he's walking right up to that line personally. But I mean, this is a story that I've been following from my own interest in what's going on in Ukraine, basically all day, and it's come away from the fact that maybe the Russians blew it up to the fact that the Russians deliberately filled that lake up to the brim in case they needed it for when the Ukrainians begun their advance, and they could just flood that river, make it impassable. Problem is, they have been maintaining the dam for over a year, so it kind of let go on its own. They didn't have time to warn their own troops further down the river. They're not helping evacuate the people in the villages in the path of this flooding. And in fact, they're shooting at people that are trying to rescue people.
yeah.
It's a war crime. It's a big old war crime.
So, yeah, two things. Yeah, one is what's happening with that dam in that part of the world. The second thing is the Tucker Carlson. That Tucker Carlson video has had more than 70 million views. So Tucker Carlson tonight, and we know from conversations the other day about views that might be 2 seconds, but that's still a large presence, much bigger than his Fox News show presence. Even if only 1/10th, 1/20th, 1/30th of those views were for real, that's still, I mean, if it was 1/30th, it's still going to be over 2 million views. And because it's only 10 minutes, it's going to have much more engagement than, for example, an hour and a half movie that was released over the weekend. So, yeah, pretty interesting to see what's happening on Twitter with starting to be used as more of a platform for video and audio, like we're using it right now. We're on Twitter right now. The show is. Hi, Twitter. Hi, Elon. Okay, let's keep trucking, shall we? Because there's a story here that speaks to me mostly of Christopher Luxon still not understanding politics. Right? This is mostly what it speaks to me of. National leader Christopher Luxon says we should have more babies. National leader Christopher Luxon has encouraged people at an infrastructure conference to have more babies in an effort to reverse the nation's declining birth rate. In a question and answer session after the announcement, Luxon encouraged the people to have more children in what he described as a tongue-in-cheek comment. We need people, he said. Here's the deal. New Zealand stopped replacing itself in 2016. I encourage all of you to go out there and have more babies if you wish. Slide that "if you wish" in there. That would be helpful. He earlier unveiled his party's 5-point infrastructure policy and touched on the shortage of workers to plug the infrastructure deficit and build for the future at the New Zealand Building Nations Conference in Christchurch on Wednesday. New Zealand's birth rate has plummeted over the past decade, but an ageing population where more people are living longer and immigration has kept the population growing. Immigration is now at pre-pandemic levels. Distinguished Professor Emeritus Paul Spoonley said New Zealand was heading into a very different era with many more older people and fewer younger people. There are big issues around how we pay for things, where we get our workers from, he said. I think it is a thing that governments should talk about. New Zealand has moved very rapidly from replacement level fertility to well below replacement level. The total fertility rate was 1.66 in the year ending December 2022. I've seen 1.8 somewhere, so maybe we can look at that. Up slightly from 1.64 the previous year, but still well below the 2.1 needed to replace the problem. There's more I want to say about this, and there's more I've got to show about this, Chewy, but how about you jump off first and give us your thoughts?
Oh, I got some thoughts. I love how Luxon has, in a joking comment, stumbled right into the great replacement theory that so many racists love. That's great because let's get into the subtext. Basically, we can't have all of those brown immigrants coming here. We need nice white babies for Jesus. That is what we're talking about.
But that's the thing. It's like we talked about retirement just last week, and the thing that I said, and some people wanted to disagree with me, was the current system doesn't work. We either need to raise the age or we need more tax take. That they seem to be the only two, and this just echoes that to me. Fewer workers.
We've spoken about this. They just need to tax rich people more, but they don't want to do that. They want to say, well, we need you to start breeding.
But as you said,
and we won't look at any of the other issues about why people aren't.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
and
know,
like people
you go
are
back
people
to
are,
our parents' generation, right? They had a single income, which was enough to raise a household with full-time carer at home. We can't do that. People are settled with student loans until God knows when. They're renting until they die. You know, you can extrapolate that out even further to environmental concerns. Do I even want to bring a child into this world?
yeah.
It's grim, and he's not talking about that. He's kind of like saying we're not having kids because we're lazy.
Lazy sex. So as Claire's saying here, who can afford more children? LOL. National have told people not to have kids they can't afford for years. Exactly. But the other thing, obviously, is the immigration. There's two ways to solve this problem. One is massive immigration. Yes, to live as we're living right now, we need a population increase. But as Chewy, as you're saying, even though I think he did reference and will reference immigration and a mix of the both, but that's the other way around it. If we want to keep things the way they are, if we want to keep the retirement age where it is, if we don't want to tax the wealthy more, and when I say we, I mean the government, then the only other option is migrants. And migrants at the moment would add to the tax take immediately. You wouldn't have to wait fucking 18 years for them to be born and grow up and then start adding back into the pool. So the same, well, I guess it's not a policy from National, but it feels like the same parties that will be getting on board this whole, you know, have more babies are also the ones who are going, whoa, to immigration. Now, the reason he doesn't understand politics yet is that this comes off the back of his abortion is tantamount to murder, i.e. we got to keep those babies in the womb being born. Women will pay for their prescriptions, i.e. more people will get pregnant. To now his third strike is we need to have more babies. Now, I'm not actually saying that he is actively saying that from his religious roots, but what I'm saying is he doesn't fucking understand politics if he thinks that this is not going to give another layer of foundation for his opposers to now use that as this person wanting to control women's bodies. You know what I mean? It's like, I would imagine the attack ads will be out tomorrow. And again, Nicola Willis will come out and say, oh, baseless, gutter. And actually not baseless, because this has just added another layer to the things that are already being said about. And look, I'll be fair. Whether it's fair or not, whether it's what he thinks or not, doesn't matter. Perception is reality, and he still doesn't understand the game of politics. Making comments about women having babies a week after National's going to get women to pay for contraception, 12 months after he said abortion is tantamount to murder. You know, it's like he doesn't understand this game. He doesn't get it.
He's bad at this because he's a fucking amateur. Like, people used to have a go at Jacinda for being a career politician. This is what you get when you get a career politician. You get someone that's good at politics and can string can actually workshop live in her own brain the consequences of what she's saying, rather than someone thinking, popping out a funny, which is a racist, white supremacist trope, bad immigration policy, doesn't tie in with anything else that he said or stood for.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if we're talking about more immigration, we walk straight into another argument of like, oh, but our infrastructure can't handle it. We don't have enough houses, and they're taking our jobs, and they're putting up the housing prices. And now we're back to a housing crisis again. It's like there's no coherent thought.
I saw a really good TikTok the other day, and we've all seen things like this before, about a guy jumping backwards and forwards from 1983 to 2023 about house prices. And, you know, the average salary in 1983, the average house price was 3 times the amount. And people in 1983 got free educations. You know, the average house price today is 10 times the amount of the average salary. And then you've got a massive student loan to go on top of it. And as you're saying, and as people in the chat are saying, affording children is now another question. I'm sure in 1983, when the average salary was only 3 times. Imagine houses today being 270K. The average salary is 90. That would be the average house price. And the average house price in Auckland is $1 million. The average house price in Dunedin's, I think, probably 600K at the moment. The average house price in Wellington's probably somewhere between, I'd say it's 7 or 8. That means it's 8, 9, 10 times the average income. And if Christopher Luxon thinks that we should be having more babies, what is he actively doing to help people financially have more babies? You know, do you want to make working for families 3 times higher? That might help. Do you want, do you know what I mean? Like, how are you doing it? Are you going to make something that's very socialized available to families to enable them? Are we going to turn mothering or fathering, whoever stays at home, into a paid position? That would help. You can say it, but what are you going to actually do to make it happen?
I'm going to be uncharitable and say, how do you make sure that it's going to the right people? Right? Because we've seen the harmful tropes of welfare queens and that sort of thing, and it's always aimed at brown people, that they're just popping out more babies to get more benefit money because that's an easy option, right?
Yeah.
Like he's,
Now,
I mean, Rob's nailed it here. My partner and I earned good money by New Zealand standards. We could barely afford to pay for ourselves, let alone popping out workers for Luxon to exploit.
Mind you, they've got little hands. They can get into places that adults can't get.
Yeah, into the machines.
Yeah,
and into the coal seams to get the good coal with their tiny hands.
Let's have a look at this though as well, because what started to happen is now the right-wing media cycle has started to get him around. And because now what happens, right, this is Luxon's inexperience, what happens next is then people have to explain away what he said and explain what he means. And we've got an example here from Heather Duplessis Allen as she pulls her best O-face. It's only 2 minutes, so don't panic, you don't have to go anywhere. About what this is actually all about. It's entitled, "Is Luxon Saying We Need More Babies Controversial?" This is the thoughts from this right-wing think tank. I think they call this National Light.
Whoa, Luxon's struck a nerve, hasn't he, telling Kiwis to have more babies? So he was at an infrastructure conference. He was talking about our shortage of workers to build the infrastructure that we need. And he said, we need more people. Here's the deal. New Zealand stopped replacing itself in 2016. I encourage all of you to go out there and have more babies if you wish. That would be helpful. Now, that's upset a bunch of sensitive Gen Zers on Twitter who've clearly bought into the low-bar Labour Party attack line a couple of weeks back, claiming that Luxon wants to charge us for contraception and can't be trusted on abortion.
No, hang on. Doesn't want to charge us. Let's be fair.
Does.
Is charging us. Not wants to. Is charging us. Let's be accurate here. Come on.
Because he's pro-life. And they see this as a continuation of Luxon involving himself in procreation. Whatever. The upset will always be upset. But what he said is actually bang.
I like the well thought out and well educated comment of whatever. A lot of time into that rebut, eh? You know, the rebut of we've weighed up all the pros and cons and we've looked at it really carefully and we've analysed what was said, and the result that I've come up with is, whatever. It's good. It's good commentary there. I'm impressed.
Hang on, isn't it? And unless we listen to him, the state's involvement in the bedroom could actually get a whole lot worse. We are on the same path as many developed countries to becoming the next Japan, where we end up with loads of old people drawing on the health system and superannuation and not enough young people supporting them. That is a very real possibility for us if we carry on like this. Our birth rate actually has been below the replacement level since the 80s. The replacement level is 2.1. We're now at 1.81.
What happened in the 80s to change that, I wonder?
In the next 10 years, because we do not have enough little ones coming through to fill the classes in every single region in this country, except for Canterbury. This is why there are warnings that superannuation will become unaffordable. Not because it actually costs too much.
Or because the tax take is wrong. That's another way you could look at the warnings for superannuation as costing too much.
But that it will cost too much when we do not have enough young people paying for it. We've got two options. We either have some more babies ourselves to replace ourselves and, as clinical as it sounds, pay for our retirement, or we import more migrants, or actually really a combo of the two. But if we don't, look at what's just happened to Japan. The birth rate there is now so low that the Japanese Prime Minister in March
Give us some numbers.
is standing on the verge of whether they can continue to function as a society. He's launched a government agency to support parents to have babies. So yeah, Luxon's right. We need more people. And for those who are upset about him saying that, they don't even know what government involvement in procreation actually looks like.
For those who are upset about him saying it, you can go fuck yourselves. Say that. Now,
there's a lot of things that I can say.
No, but notice
government intervention in that.
Notice she didn't say anything about what Japan's numbers were. She listed us as 1.82. Yeah. Japan's reproduction rate is 1.26. Now, I guess you could argue if you are a falling rate, it is on the same path. But the difference between where we're at and where Japan's at is as far as the east is from the west. to get to 1.26 from either 1.66 or 1.82, whichever is the correct number, is decades and decades and decades. So I'm not suggesting that a downward spiral can't lead there. So it's fair to say that she's correct with that. But what I am saying is to use that as an example, to me, comes across as scaremongering rather than actually putting on the table the conversation that we need to have, which is, if we're going to pay for our retirement, so because what everyone's talking about, taxes could be changed today that would easily cover it no matter what the population is going to be and whatever decline the birth rate is going to be, or a huge number of migrants to the country to pay for it. Either way, that would give a solution. But National Party, or I should probably be fair and say Christopher Luxon, his solution is, he wouldn't say like this because he's a Christian, but get fucking people. Come on. But only if you're married and only if you're straight. I'm adding those bits in. He didn't say that. I'm not going to be uncharitable, but I wouldn't be surprised if that was a thought.
There's a bunch of things the government can do to make it easier for people to have babies.
Yep. Tell me.
They can make it easier to pay for them. There are countries that give a bonus for having a child. You can look at healthcare. You can look at schooling and that sort of thing. But it's just so, like, even telling people to have more babies is incredibly short-term thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we don't have enough kids, we've still got crowded classrooms, right? You'd think that our classrooms would be thinning out, and they're not. They're looking at something and going, "Wow, we just won't have enough to pay for a retirement." And it's either these two things, because Heather says so. It's either migrants or babies, or maybe a combination of the two, and there's no third option. There's no, well, maybe we need to start raising money now, putting more money into the retirement fund, to this massive retirement fund that we've built up. No, we won't look at that, because we can't, for some reason, have a sensible conversation around tax.
Yeah, I agree. And
people don't want it.
I'm just so surprised at the end of her little bit there. We didn't hear.
You went to Fiji.
But we didn't hear it. So
I also would like to, that I am really enjoying actually seeing her on camera and seeing the start of the Mike Hoskins pinstripe blazer denim jacket combo life cycle. I've always had questions about where he got his clothing from, and it's obviously from Heather's cast-offs that he stitches together himself at home.
I just thought I'd better bring it back up if you're going to say that. There you go.
Yeah, look at yeah.
Actually,
but yeah,
you're absolutely right. That absolutely could be something that Hosking wore in the morning. Maybe they've only got, like, I know that TVNZ has a wardrobe, and sometimes you do see the same blazers, especially on women, because it's more noticeable. Going through, like, 3 weeks later, it'll be on the breakfast host, and then it'll be on the midday news host, like 3 weeks after that, and then Hillary will be wearing it at 7 o'clock 3 weeks after that. So, but that does look like something that could be out of Hosking's wardrobe in the morning. That's completely right.
Couple of comments, if we can go through those,
please.
Yep. I wonder who his audience was for that comment. I want to see the rooms that he's talking to, ultimately.
Yeah, well, it was an infrastructure conference. So, there's going to be people who get...
He's telling engineers to go and fuck.
Anything I remember from engineers at university, they've got to be full of liquor first. It's going to be mostly men. It's going to be people in the construction industry. It's going to be people who make the roads and that kind of stuff. That's who's going to be in those rooms. Fletchers and those sorts of people.
Yeah. Mr. Anderson said the Ministry of Procreation. Anderson. Something Rimmer will love.
You can't say the word Rimmer when you're talking about sex at the same time. You just can't. It's not fair.
Simon says, I see Japan has very strict immigration policies, and that is a factor in their low population decline. So that they don't want to open up their country to more immigration.
Yep.
So you see their choice playing out live there. DIY Guru says the world population reached 8 billion in 2022. So Yeah, there's
Maybe
people
we can
around.
Maybe we can get back to borrowing some children from other countries and maybe try
No,
and
Russia's
helping out
cornered
the
the market
population.
on that, unfortunately.
Oh, have they? Okay.
Yeah. Things that the government can do: preschool care, lunches in schools, free education. Mr. Anderson again says the planet doesn't need more people. You know, maybe again, like, we're not going to breed our way out of the problems that we're facing, right? We need new ideas.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to make a joke then, but I won't. I'm going to make the joke. I'm going to be more mature tonight and not laugh. Yeah. Look, all good points. I just think, I mean, like, I like to try and be charitable when I can. You know, it was probably him being a bit flippant and a bit silly, but that's why I come back to this idea that he doesn't get politics, because he's the leader of an opposition who is facing questions about, and I'll say it again, if they're fair or not, you know, that's another conversation, but he's facing questions about his thoughts, his legislations around women's bodies. And this is the joke he makes, if indeed it is a joke, or light-hearted comment. It's just, that's what goes to show you got zero self-awareness in what you're saying, and that doesn't make, imagine that on the world scene. What kind of gaffes are we going to get coming out of this man if he's the Prime Minister at the G20 or whatever it's going to be? Good Lord.
Yeah. He's not fit. He's not fit to lead the National Party. He's certainly not fit to lead the country.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got another text message to do. Yep.
Another comment here from Stephanie. A universal basic income would help young families for stay-at-home parents. Absolutely. Universal basic income is something that we should be looking at. But again, too radical. The wrong people would get it. And then it's like, oh, we're just paying the wrong people to stay home and fuck. Bad luck.
Such an aggressive way to say it.
That's what I would call it, the stay home and fuck fund or something.
Oh,
but
there
yeah.
you go. Making New Zealand more fuckable.
Stay home
like that.
and fuck.
Make New Zealanders fuck again.
We need to come up with some snappy acronym.
All right. Hey, let's jump on to the next one. This is a little bit of a quickie. And really, it's just me keeping in front of us the things we need to know about, I'll say the alt-right, the conspiracy, the disinformation crew. Chantelle Baker, being on their Unreality Check radio, wants to try and convince her listeners and the world that this is the very last democratic election there will ever be.
Mark it in your diaries, people.
Based on, well, it's good. That means if Labour wins, then they'll be in for the rest of time. So that makes it even more important. Based on the DIA document that we've already gone through heavily and shown you what it does and doesn't say. But of course, Chantelle misrepresents it. It might surprise you.
Could this possibly be the last democratic election in New Zealand's history?
Ooh.
The one coming up in
No,
October.
end of clip.
Could
Is
it?
it possible
Could it
that
be?
we may never see a free and democratic election again? I
Ooh.
believe that this could be the last properly democratic election we have. And the reason I say that is because of the new document from the Department of Internal Affairs that they released yesterday at 2:00. It was a consultation document.
Consultation
it was proposing
document.
changes to how media and social media is regulated here in New Zealand. It's a drastically radical proposal. And what it would do would mean that you would not be allowed to make Facebook posts,
Okay, this is
Instagram
important.
posts on Twitter, posts on Rumble. Any major channels would be so heavily regulated by an unelected regulatory system, by an unelected regulator, that you couldn't fight it. You can't.
Okay, so very, very quickly, right? She's saying you won't be able to do this. Now, I kind of know that most of us don't need this, and we're on top of this. But that's a complete lie and a complete falsehood from the document. The document is very clear. This proposed legislation, right? Proposed legislation, this discussion document is only there for groups that have an expected audience of 100,000 or more annually. So it's not for you on Facebook or you on Twitter. Make this really, really clear. This is for platforms that have an audience of 100,000 or more, or have 25,000 account holders. So therefore, if you've got a membership of 25,000 or more, you may come under this should it become law. If you have an audience of over 100,000 or more, you may come under it. But it's not, as Chantelle has just said, you. But we've seen this before from Chantelle. We've seen this come out as to her claiming an authority for knowing what the documents say and then misreading it. I want to find one more part of this where she talks again about I've read the document. We've talked about this before.
Can't do anything about it. This person, this individual, along with their board, would make up the rules. They would get to change them on.
Not true. The industry makes up the rules. And we did this yesterday. The industry makes up the rules. They come up with a document. This supposed board, whatever they're going to be, can then enforce them. So the person doesn't make up the rules. Wrong. False. Completely false.
And they would impose huge fines on social media companies and different media companies if they didn't comply. Why does this affect an election? Well, because in this document, and I've read through it, and you all should as well.
You haven't.
That's the much I want to say, because all I wanted to do was remind us one time. This is a bit Inception with all of us in here. Look, I'm here now 3 times. How scary is that? Yeah, is that this is something that Chantelle does, right? Chantelle says, I've read this, claiming an authority. And I want to play for you a clip that I had with her in a conversation. This is actually a clip of us watching a clip of me talking about how she reads things.
And now we're going to watch it.
Once again, my question was, do you know how it actually works? How some of the newsroom gets that money to do public? Do you know what they have to do? Like newsroom or that kind of entity?
Well, yeah, when I've read, as in when it comes to the contract that they've signed to get the funding.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've read the contract.
So I've read the contract. Now, I guess what I'm saying, and I don't know this for fact, is Chantelle reads things and then puts a Chantelle filter on it. Because she said she read this. And what she said is the Prime Minister wouldn't engage because mean people shouting, protesting. Whereas the report says that far differently. So I would suggest that when you hear Chantelle say, yeah, I read the report, that would be taken with more than just a grain of salt, Chewy. So just to say again, this stuff going around the internet, she's misrepresented the document again. She's claimed an authority by saying she's read it again. And again, she's either read it and got it wrong, or she's read it and she's purposefully misinterpreting it, because at least 3 or 4 of the things she said in there in that 45-second clip were patently false. And I'm again not even sticking up for the document. This is the same as a free speech union. All I'm saying is patently false as what the document says. So all I'm telling you about is what the document says and what these groups are saying, because they're not saying what's in the document. We can have another debate about what's the content of the document, but first we have to actually have a debate around what is true and what is false. And remember, Chantelle Baker is very keen on something.
Your feelings don't really matter right now because we're talking about facts.
So the facts are she's full of shit. Chewy.
Yeah, I'm always suspicious when Chantelle says that she's read something.
That's the story.
I don't think this document would have been glossy enough for her to pick up and read. I do wonder that these guys are pushing back so hard on them that they are on the right track. That if they're that worried about what the consequences are for them enough to misrepresent it and push it out onto all of their listeners and go, they are coming for you. They are coming for their revenue streams.
Yeah, well, and look, I mean, the truth is that actually, we're very small. Everyone knows that we're very small, but we still, certainly just even on our YouTube views, get certainly more than 100,000 views. I don't know if that means we've got more than 100,000 customers per annum. So, and I know from, you're watching some people, they get hundreds of thousands of views per video. We're a New Zealand independent group speaking to New Zealand people about New Zealand news. So we're always going to be subset. But we would probably come under it. And am I concerned about it? I'm not concerned about a discussion document, but I am going to participate in the conversation using and looking at it accurately and seeing what it says, not trying to do what the Free Speech Union doing, which is hyping it up, and not trying to do what Chantelle Baker is doing, which is, I think the Free Speech Union are hyping it up and they're saying the downstream effect would be, whereas I think Chantelle Baker is just straight out lying about it. Now, I'm saying lying, and that could be, some could see that as defamatory, but I think I've shown that she's wrong, and she's either willfully wrong, meaning she's lying, or she's stupid and she can't actually read. I don't know which one of those two things it is, but they're the only two options. She's either too dumb to be able to read and figure it out, or she's willfully wrong. You can decide which one of those it is, or maybe it's both. I don't know, and I don't normally say. I don't normally say things like that, saying someone's too dumb. But I've been following her for long enough and interacted with her for long enough and showed you guys for long enough how she's always wrong. That it's either ignorance, it's either stupidity, or it's a willful grift. They're the only two options. I would like to lean towards willful grift on some levels because I feel a bit wrong about calling someone stupid. It feels quite aggressive. But to be truth, as JK says, can be both. They're the only really two options.
Look at her background. She has no grounding in journalism, research, policy, anything like that. She has no background, no authority to be reading and understanding a document like this.
Yeah.
Like we can be mean if you want, but it is just Chantelle Baker's reckons based on her feelings, her and it's just whatever's going to get her play, she'll say it.
Yeah,
it works for her audience.
Yeah. Now let me say one thing. We were going to talk to Lloyd Burr tonight. I think probably what's happened is Lloyd's jumped into our waiting room, saw Chantelle Baker up on our screen, and has probably run. I honestly think that's probably what's happened because he doesn't know much about what we do and that kind of stuff. And I get it if that's what's happened. Lloyd, if you're watching the live stream now, you're welcome to jump back in. But that's, I suspect, what's actually probably happened, that he's probably jumped into our waiting room and gone, what the fuck is this? I do not want to be involved with that person, and is gone. Don't know if that's the case, but that I wouldn't be surprised if it was. But we're now going to move on to wrap up the show. We're talking about Michael Wood, who's probably been the biggest news story of the week, certainly with coverage-wise, and his airport shares. Let's have a look.
Meanwhile, Michael Wood has finally sold the airport shares that saw him stood down as Transport Minister. But there's more turbulence ahead, with a high-powered parliamentary watchdog now launching an investigation. Also revealed, Jacinda Ardern knew about the 12 reminders to the Labor MP, but Chris Hipkins didn't. Michael Wood wasn't the only minister getting a grilling today. Political editor Jessica Much-Mackay has the details.
There's more to that story. She knew about it, and I believe, if they don't say it in this story, I think I've got it linked somewhere else, that she was told, or was under the understanding that he had actually sold them, which is why this is just going from worse to worse to worse for Michael Wood.
A whole lot of regret from two top ministers.
I deeply regret that decision.
These are major errors on my part, and I deeply, deeply regret them.
He regrets not selling $13,000 of Auckland Airport shares despite 12 reminders. Now his actions will be studied by a parliamentary watchdog.
Sometimes the information was not coming directly to me, it was coming into my office. I've acknowledged my error here.
12 times though.
It was effectively something that I knew was there that I needed to do, and I put to the side.
The inquiry means the Prime Minister...
I mean, you could, if we're being fair and level-headed here, we can say the same sort of thing about him. Like, maybe not to the same aggressive perception that we just put out there about Chantelle, but he's either too stupid to not get around to this, or he's too disorganised to keep his affairs in order, both of which are not a good look for a Minister of the Crown. Like for me, for example, I said this last night, I'm happy to admit that I'd be too disordered at times to get around to things. You know, I'm one of those people who gets reminded 19 times about something before I do it, and it's not because I am willfully not doing it, it's because it just slips my mind, and it slips my mind, and it slips my mind. But that's not a good practice for a Minister of the Crown, you know, either to have a PA who would sort it out for you, or for you to do it yourself. Yeah, time to fly says or lazy. It could be that as well. It could be or lazy, but whatever one of those things it is, it's not a good look. It's just not a good look. Anything before we keep going, shall we?
No, I agree with everything you said there.
...is not as gung-ho about handing his transport job back.
I'm going to wait and see. What's that?
The PM was only told about the drama last week.
That's me.
But turns out Jacinda Ardern knew, and so did her Chief of Staff.
The Prime Minister must act. He must remove him from those portfolios.
Have you offered your resignation to the Prime Minister again in light of the inquiry into this?
No.
Adding salt to the wound, he told a journalist in 2021 he didn't
Yeah,
have
it's not
anything
good.
extra to add to his list of financial interests, missing another opportunity to deal with this issue.
Minister, have you sold the shares?
Yes, as of today, I have sold the shares and I have also donated the proceeds of that sale to charity.
I think, like everybody, I can't quite understand what's happened here.
I have let the Prime Minister down, I have let my colleagues down, I've let myself down. I absolutely acknowledge that.
It wasn't a great day in the office for the Education Minister either, facing Parliament's court for not correcting an answer in the debating chamber in February about...
Now, we've got more about this. We'll get to this in a minute because I've had... How do I say this without identifying the person, Chewy? Because I've received a message from somebody who I can't identify because I've been told that it's before the parliamentary committee, so this person can't talk about it publicly, but it's someone from within the halls of power.
It was just some clarification about what we were talking about the other day, right?
Yeah.
Who understands it a bit better than we did.
So we'll get to that shortly, but yeah, this is not looking good either. Although at the moment it still seems that Tinetti is suffering from procedural errors as opposed to nefarious actions. But we said this in the last episode we did when we talked about it. I've had someone from inside Parliament message me privately and anonymously and give me a whole bunch of, I'll say a whole bunch of perspective, because they aren't someone who necessarily wants to see Labour succeed. So we will take it with a grain of salt, but I'll give you some of that information shortly.
About shifting the release of school attendance data when she knew it was wrong just hours later.
I made a snap decision. I had a full afternoon of meetings. I did not think about it again.
Jan Tinetti is ranked 6th in Cabinet, but says she didn't know the rules.
Minister, on the 22nd of February, did your staff at any stage raise the possibility that you should go down to the House and correct the record?
There were a range of views that were given. I have stated that within there.
Did they advise at any time you should go down to the House and correct the record?
Were given. I had to make a consideration.
But a document obtained by One News shows a ministerial advisor telling the Prime Minister's office we'd ideally like to time the release of the data carefully with an announcement. But again, the minister reckons she wasn't in the loop.
How can you be functioning as a minister with all due respect?
A minister's office is a completely dynamic environment.
The Prime Minister unimpressed at having to wade into two political dramas of his own minister's making.
So lots of stuff in there as well. And we talked about these situations last week. Jan Tinetti is a little bit of her own worst enemy right now. You remember last week, she was like, I'm not taking questions on that. I'm not taking questions on that. I'm not. And today, even today, it just felt a bit like there was pushback. And like always, complete transparency is the best moment when you've had your hand caught in the cookie jar. When you tell any kid, be honest with me. Yes, there'll be a consequence for your actions, but honesty is always the best policy in general. And it still does feel a little bit like there's kind of a pushback from her too. You know what I mean?
Oh, especially in a story like this, right? Because as we said initially, it's a boring story. It's really boring. And if she just soft pedaled it, it'd be gone. Especially at the moment. But now her reacting that way to the press and being quite hardline on it and that sort of thing is just keeping it fresh in the story cycle.
So let's just have a very quick look at the Michael Wood situation, and then we'll move on to the Jan Tinetti situation, and then we'll wrap up. So on News Talk ZB today, Michael Wood told Ardern's office he had sold airport shares, MPs here. Michael Wood's shareholding in Auckland Airport was raised 3 times with the former Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's office, which was wrongly told that he had sold them. Parliament has heard today. The Under Fire Minister has now sold his shares in Auckland Airport. He will donate the money to charity. It emerged in Parliament today that Ardern's office was told at least 3 times about the shareholding and was once wrongly told that he had sold the shares. Now, however you look at that, that is worse again still, Joey. Now, whether that's a procedural error and whether it's one of his people telling the office that and they got it wrong and there was a genuine mistake, we've said this all the way through. We're balanced and we're fair. Perception is reality. It looks like for some reason he was trying to hold on to the shares, and even There was myth truths between his office and the Prime Minister's office about having sold them. That's how it looks. Perception is reality. That's the foundation for the opposition's attacks, Joey.
Yeah, because his response is basically gold standard now.
Yeah.
Like it just needed to happen last year. Like, yes, a transport minister, I had shares in Auckland Airport. I realized that was inappropriate. I sold those shares. And actually, as an aside, donated the funds to that to a local charity. Great answer. Fantastic.
Yeah.
If it's on time.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't. And now his only option is to just hope for the news cycle to move on. It's too close to the election for it to really let him go at this point.
I wonder.
They'll just keep riding this.
Well, I also wonder about what's going to happen. The other ways that politicians and leaders can often correct their ministers is to give them a significant demotion in the list. So these ministers that have caused issues for Christopher Hipkins, remember Hipkins was riding high for quite a long time, certainly based around his response to the cyclones and stuff. And this stuff will be dragging his ratings down. Although, Chewy, I got to say, I'm sure there's going to be another poll out next week. If Hipkins is still well ahead of Luxon after all of this, what does that say about Luxon and what the people think of him? But anyway, like one of the ways to kind of go, these people need to earn my trust back, is to drop you from number 6 to number 26 and be like,
But then, by all accounts, Wood is a good minister. He's a competent minister. He's across his portfolios. He does good work. And then it just seems to be like this whole thing is stupid. And it's become even more stupid because of the choices or lack of choices that he's made. And it just seems like if he's a competent minister, then we all lose.
But I agree with that. But the flip side to that conversation is you need to get elected to be a minister.
Yeah.
Right? The party needs to get elected to be a minister. And if his involvement in the party, his involvement in the election cycle is going to be a net negative for Labour getting elected, then no matter how good he is, it should always be the party over the person. Do you know what I'm saying? So it's like I've forgotten this guy's name once before, but the American comedian who was a senator with his hands over in the army thing over a woman's breast without touching her. Yeah. I've forgotten the name again. You watch people correct me immediately. And the thing, the former writer for SNL, fantastic senator, But with the stand that the left were taking in America, he was done. He was done with that. He had no credibility left because of that, because of what was going on at the time. It's the situation. It's what's going to happen. So it'll be really interesting to say. Now, let's move on to Tinetti really quickly, because as I've said, I've had someone from the halls of power, someone in government, message me. Thank you, Mark Al Franken. I knew that was going to happen. Someone in Parliament messaged me about our last story we did on Tinetti. And we very much played down quite a lot of things, but we also said we don't know all the information yet, let's wait and see. And one of the things we played down is it was a 7-day, because TVNZ reported it was a 7-day between when she could have reported it to when she did report it was 7 days. That was wrong. It was TVNZ's error. And I've heard them talking about it tonight, saying it was 14 sitting days. The information I got here a couple of days after we released it. So this person in Parliament watched our video and then messaged me. Let me read it to you. Couple of things, and I'm not giving you any details because this person says they can't talk about it publicly. The news report was wrong in saying she took only a week to correct her answer. She gave the answer on 22nd of Feb. She corrected on 2nd of May. They gave her 13 sitting days. TV3 tonight said 14 to correct the record. But most importantly, the Ministry of Education usually takes months and months to release attendance data, as it takes a long time to clean the data and prepare it for individual schools. But lately, they've been working super hard to get it out much earlier so that schools get their individual reports ASAP. Normally, the term 3 data wasn't released until April the following year, almost useless by this time. Now, I'm taking this with a grain of salt. I don't know whether that's accurate or not, but I'm just giving you the information that I've been given. The reason that they rushed it through, this person is saying, was to give principals important individualised data pertaining to their school so they could use it to plan. Term 3 data being released prior to Christmas, which is what we're talking about rather than the following year, was important because principals in late December and early January were working on their annual plans. So the Term 3 data was very useful to inform those plans and let them know if they needed to apply for funding. They didn't get that information until very late February, after Term 1 had started and well after finalised and submitted their annual plans. Now, on one level I go, oh yeah, it would be much better for them to get the information more quickly. But on the other layer, I kind of go, but hang on, this is how it works every year. You know, like, if this is how it works every year. If they don't get the data till the following year every year, obviously there's a way that they can submit and prepare for the following year without this. So on one level I go, well, it would be great to have it sooner, right? So you can plan for the following year. But on the other hand, I go, but hang on, for the previous 10 years that principal's been at that school, they've done it the other way and they've done it just fine. So giving you the information that I've been given doesn't mean necessarily that's a slam dunk. This person goes on to say, so the data being released early was important. The ministry worked so hard to get it ready much earlier so that the school had good data. No media are really covering this angle, but it's important. So I wanted to put that out there, leave it with you. As I say, if every single year you don't get the Term 3 data until April the next year, you've already planned for the year that you're in, doesn't seem like such a big deal. However, if the ministry did work on this early to get it out early to help schools and they didn't do it, I get that that's a bit of a bastard as well. Finally, this person who sent me says this, just so everyone's clear why I'm being a little bit deep-throatish about it. I can't talk publicly as this is before the Privileges Committee, but thought I'd let you know why it's an important issue. Now, I'm taking this all with a grain of salt. I also don't think necessarily the release of the data later, if it gets released later every single year, what they're basically saying is they still got it earlier than they normally got it. If they normally get it in April, they still got it in February. So it was still earlier and they'd still planned the previous year when the data got released in April. So I don't know whether that's a fair criticism or not, or it's still a procedural type error. But that's come straight from the halls of power to me personally. Didn't come to me, and the person didn't ask to remain anonymous, but as soon as it says in their message that they can't talk about it publicly, I've chosen to keep it anonymous. This person has also offered to talk to us, so I guess if and when there is a chance to talk about it, we might do one of those things where there's a black screen and the no, not really. So that's an angle. We're fair. We'll put it out there, and you guys can put as much weight in that as you want. I still kind of see it as a procedural error. I see it as a bit of a slap in the face to the ministry if that is indeed what has happened, that they did hard work and it wasn't released. But I don't see it as a smoking gun because, as I've said 3 times now, every other year the schools didn't have the data till April. So obviously there's a way they can work when they don't have the data till the following year. So it wasn't essential that it got released to them. Chewy.
Yeah. In the chat, V Bunch said yes, and the reports are in a new format since 2018. Often they don't get it until May.
Yeah. All right.
So from the sounds of that's echoing what you said, is that, like, even if it was a bit delayed, they still got it earlier than what they have been getting it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
and it just reeks of it's election year. Let's find something.
Yeah. And just to echo, Chewy's seen this message, so he knows it's from someone in the halls of power. I'm trying to find a way to make it really.
I think we're already bigging it up. Look,
Yeah,
I'll tell you who. I'll tell you who it is because he didn't ask. It's Christopher Luxon. He's a friend of the show. We're going to get him on later.
So yeah, I mean, people in the chat saying storm in a teacup. People saying, surely they know the attendance. Yeah, I think that's all true. I think that, again, it might be a technical issue that is a bit of a pain, but I don't see this information that we've been sent as a particularly egregious sin. My word.
And look, I think the story would have gone away quicker if she was better at batting away these questions from the media.
Yeah.
She kind of wasn't treating it like a free and breezy, like, no, it's nothing to worry about. It's just a procedural thing. It's a very boring story. Let's move on. she came out quite combative, which is always like, what's that? I smell blood in the water.
Yeah.
There's fresh meat here, you know?
Hey, just really and finally, and JK's sent through a message that makes me just want to mention it as well, because it kind of tags onto the back of the Michael Wood conversation around Auckland shares. I spent a shitload of time today with fucking Auckland City Council on live stream in the background while I was working. Oh God.
How was that?
I went. I looked at it. I looked at it. I had meetings today, so I looked at it at about 10:30 this morning, and I went off to my meetings and stuff. And I came home, and it was still going at 2:30 in the afternoon. So I put it on again, had it on the background, and they eventually closed it off at 5 o'clock tonight. No vote taken over the shares. So I don't know what time they started. Probably 10 in the morning through till 5. So 7 hours. No vote. And they've come up, look, I should probably have the details for you. I don't have it in front of me. But basically, it looks like Mayor Brown's going to lose his opportunity to sell it. So they've come up with a bit of a compromise. And I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, which is someone wants to sell 500 million worth of the shares, which I think is about 4%. Wayne Brown, did I just say Len Brown? Anyway, Wayne Brown, his compromise was to sell 8% of the shares, so that's $1 billion, and also to increase rates by 1%. Now, every financial expert, and I think including Bernard Hickey on the news last night, is saying this is a really good asset. Why would you sell it? Yes, it's a downtime, but it's going to come back and it's going to return a dividend. The last 10 years since 2010, it's earned, not deficit, but earned Auckland over $400 million. So even if it's lost several, a couple of $100 million in the downtime, they're still net up in that time period. So, and I did a tweet today saying, if anyone can actually tell me a financial expert who thinks this is a good idea, can you send it to me? Haven't heard from anybody. So it feels like some of the politicians think it's a good solution, and no one else does. And I also thought today, this is an asset that's been bought and paid for by the people of Auckland over decades. And what mandate, with 180,000 votes out of 1.5 million people, do you think you have to actually then sell it off? Then you get voted out, and then they're gone for good. Like, I'm intrigued with that conversation as well.
That the city was gifted those shares. They didn't even buy them. They're literally raiding the family silverware to pay the power bill. It's stupid. The airport's spent the money, made a massive expansion. Yep. It's got through the pandemic. There's all the chatter of selling the shares, right? So all of that's depreciated the sale price. The airport's just mentioning that it's doubling landing fees in the next couple of years, so they're going to have even more money coming in. And the city where the airport is has a massive say in what the airport does. That's important. And then the whole thing is the guy that fronted up all the money for Wayne Brown's mayoral campaign is trying to gobble up land around the airport. And is nobody going, this seems a little fucking sus? Mayor Brown's had a hard on for selling these shares before the election, immediately after the election, and now here he's just drawn a straight line. If the council wants to get rid of underperforming assets to make money, they're sitting on like 7 golf courses that lose money every year. Sell one of them. Can't do it.
I heard
old people love playing golf.
Let us say a big thanks to our patrons. If I can figure out how to fucking do this. Oh, we can't use that screen, can we? Because of the framing. We can use that one though. Huge thanks to our patrons. Thank you for being involved. We appreciate all of you. If you would like to support what we do, be a part of what we do, there's numerous ways you can do it. Financially, it's patreon.com/Big Hairy News. I know I've talked up a lot about t-shirts and that kind of stuff. I put an email through to the supplier I was thinking about working with, and to be honest, as I said to you at the start of the show, I've been in the studio for hours and hours and hours every day, and I haven't followed it up, and I haven't heard back from him, so I'll be doing that tomorrow, and we'll see what's happening for next week, maybe, possibly. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News. The other thing you can do, obviously, is share our stuff around. Over the weekend, there will be a lot of information going out on Twitter. There'll be clips going out on our Google and Apple podcasts and Spotify podcasts, our audio podcast. Great for you to check those out, listen to them over the weekends. There'll be highlights, there'll be full shows as well. Helps us stay up in the charts, helps us to be able to do what we want to do. Chewy, there is one more video we want to show, which is a TikTok video you sent me. But before we do that, to wrap up the week, is there anything in the chat we want to get out there to wrap the show up?
Yep. Couple of comments. If anything, the council should buy more shares now while they're not worth as much. Mr. Anderson says golf clubs lose money every year. If they want to get rid of an underperforming asset, where did that go? Getting rid of an underperforming asset? Get rid of the mayor. I don't know if the council would get a lot of money for that. Like, a lot of his parts seem quite worn and well used.
Yeah, he might be negatively geared, Joey.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't spoke about it, which just speaks to the quality of the shit fuckery that's been going on this week. But obviously, Sue Gray is facing her disciplinary committee, so I definitely want to talk about the result of that whenever we get it.
I saw Sue Gray I probably came up on Twitter. Sue Gray in a conversation a couple of weeks ago, thinking that they might get 20% of the vote at the election time. So certifiably insane. Like, certifiable. Like, for anyone to think that they're going to get 20% of the vote who's not there now, who's servicing 1% of society, it's just, yeah, brainworms is the right word. Anything else?
Nope, that's everything.
Here's a little thing that Chewy sent me today, and we thought maybe you would enjoy it. It's a good way to maybe finish up the show. Oh, look, we can do this because we'll be framed beautifully. Look at that. How about this? So this is a TikTok from Jordan Rivers in New Zealand. You'll enjoy this, and then we'll say goodnight to you all.
Well, hey, you got some mail. Haven't had that in a while. Hope it's from someone important. Let's have a look here. Who's this from? Who is it? Nicola Willis, National Party candidate. Oh, yeah, haven't had mail from her before. Tell you what you got to do with that, though. You just pop over to your bin, get that open, and chuck that shit in there. Really push that down, though, so no one else can see it, because that's horrible, and then sorted.
There you go.
Better living, everyone.
Better living, everyone. All right, team. It's been a lovely week. Thank you for joining us. We will have to catch you next week. Now, remember, next week, it's a short week for us. There'll be no show on Wednesday night because there's a little something going on. And other than that, I think I will, because I'm doing a bunch of work at the moment in the studio. I'm kind of categorizing. I'm making categories. Is that the right thing? Like, what are those things in a library? You pull out the drawer and you flick through the cards. A card catalog. That's right.
Catalog,
isn't it? I'm cataloging. There you go. I'm cataloging a whole bunch of clips from BHN. It's always interesting to have a look what's actually in there. Like, I'll show you this. This is really uninteresting, 100%. So this is my clips catalog. All right, it looks a bit like this, of stuff to do with BHN. I've only been doing it for a couple of months, but because I've got these clips going on, there is a good chance that I could put together a bit of a one-off show pretty easily by going flick, 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 flick. Hey, let's have a show. So I might do something for you guys on Wednesday night. I know I talked about that last week for Monday, but it kind of didn't happen. Oh, for whatever it was. But I've got a new system now that makes it quite easy. So I will attempt to do it for Wednesday night next week, but the rest of the week is pretty much normal, isn't it, Joey? Nothing much going on.
No.
Everyone have yourself a really safe weekend. We definitely want to see you back Monday night from 9 p.m. for another edition. Go the local sports team. Is that right?
Go team sports.
Win the sports ball this weekend. Is that right? Something like that. And we'll catch you Monday night. Be safe over the weekend, team. See you here in... I'm trying to be cool and say something like 72 hours. Is it 72 hours? Friday, Saturday,
Time
Sunday,
is a construct.
Monday. See you in 96 hours. There you go. I think I got it right. 96 hours.
Boom.
Right. 94 hours and 40 minutes. See, 95 hours and 40 minutes.
He's spiraling.
94 hours and 40 minutes. All right, dude. Take it easy. Speak to you next week.
Cheers,
Ciao.
bud.